things we want to do. First, we want to talk about why we believe AI changed everything and nothing. There's a lot of mythbusters about what AI did, and there's also many people that are underestimated what AI is really going to do to ourselves, to our companies, to society in general. So we want to talk a bit about that. Then we want to put that more into the context of business model. What are the risks you should assess? How your business model might be at risk? What can you do to reinforce it? Then we're going to move to a couple of art or not questions. Alex prepared a couple of very interesting questions to find out where do you stand on a couple of points, and we're going to debrief the answers with you. And then at the end, we'll go into a larger Q&A. We'll probably take a couple of questions during the presentations. We'll do a couple of breaks between each section, but we'll also take further questions at the end. So Alex, if you can move to the... So to give some context here, here are a couple of AI-related news that were communicated in the past weeks. And first, you can see that Forbes and Fortune reported that it seemed that 95% of GenAI project fails because companies wanted to avoid friction. And this was not a research of Forbes, it was the MIT that reported this number. So first, it seemed that many GenAI projects seems to fail right now and there is no interest. But at the same time, there's many companies, particularly consulting companies like McKinsey or Accenture, that are literally firing people right now and are afraid for their business. So it seems true that these companies, as today, are already being impacted. They are getting less projects, they're firing employees. And talking about companies that seems to benefit from that, Salesforce CEO recently reported that it seemed that AI helped them to report 4,000 jobs. So here, the point is not to say that everything that you heard about AI is true, but there's a couple of things that are true, a couple that are not true. The point is try to think how your business model is going to be negatively impacted by AI or can be positively impacted if you adapt your business model. How can you find a way to be more resilient by looking at your business well and being a bit smarter? And in fact, is AI really important, or is the business model that you have and the way it's designed more important than the technology itself? So something that is very important is we believe that many people are overestimating the impact of AI as today, but underestimated the impact of AI in the next 5 to 10 years. So what we're going to do today is kind of give you some clarity, at least give you our perspective on what we believe will happen or might not happen, and how can you become more resilient. And for that, there's probably no better person than Alex to share his perspective on AI and business models. So Alex is going to start to share the insight in a minute. Just before that, I just want to share a couple of things, a couple of housekeeping rules and principles. So you might be wondering, will this presentation be available? Yes, it will be. You don't have to take screenshot of everything and take note of every single thing we say. We'll share it in the upcoming weeks. And in fact, if you want to be sure you receive the presentation, you can kind of sign up for a newsletter or share your email right now. I think there is a survey or a poll that will pop up in a couple of seconds. And if you write down your email, you will be sure that you will receive this presentation and many other cool updates from Strategyzer. So Alex, we're really curious to get your insight, but before that, can you share a bit about what we've been working this summer as Strategyzer? Yeah, we work on a couple of programs and playbooks. Maybe you want to share a few words about this?
Yeah, maybe. Now you said you only get the slides if you sign up on the call to action. Actually, you'll get the slides in any case. The call to action is really more if you want our sales team to reach out to you about these types of programs. So something happened here, I guess, with the animation, but what we've been working on quite a bit the last couple of weeks and months is on playbooks and programs to help you use the tools the way we use them. Because we always had a software that would allow you to sketch out your business model, your value proposition. You could do a couple of things with that. What we saw is that a lot of people want guidance, want process. So what we started to do is share these playbooks. So I've been working with a leadership team of a large beauty company just last week in the summer, and working with a tech company, a global industrial tech company next week. And what we do there is we apply playbooks. So we're sharing those. We started with a couple, using AI, GenAI, to craft your value proposition or aligning product sales and marketing teams. So way beyond innovation. So just go to strategyzer.com/programs and you can see a little bit about that.
Yeah, and we'll share a bit more about this at the end too, but yeah, it's something great we've been working on. And yes, Alex, I think you would like to introduce also Menti at that time. I guess your people already use it, but if you can say a few words about Menti and what we're going to do with it today.
Yeah, and I apologize already that I'm not in my studio, so everything is going to be a little bit more cumbersome. But we first want to know, like we always do, we ask you, who are you? So maybe you can just participate in the Menti and tell us, are you more in innovation? Are you in more general leadership, product leader? And that way we also get a little bit of a feel for who's in the room. You can see quite a lot of general coaches, a lot of innovation coaches. Actually, Strategyzer did what we like to call an expansion pivot beyond innovation into strategy, product, value propositions quite a bit, because our tools get used kind of everywhere. The first column, by the way, is a general business leader. So interesting to see. So we got a couple of product leaders, very few people from marketing, sales, a lot of people in innovation. And I think there's going to be a big role for innovation leaders, thinkers, doers, and coaches with AI. And that's what we're going to go into. So I'm actually not going to tell you anything about technology per se. That's not my place. But I'm going to get you to think about your business model and how AI might impact it. Again, because technology is one thing, but I don't think it's actually the most difficult one. Okay, so gives a little bit of a feel of who's in the room. Now, I'm curious, since we created this tool over 2 decades ago. We had lunch with Eve and somebody from a Japanese big company, and we were talking about the beginnings of the business model canvas just last week. Okay, so who of you has recently mapped your business model? Not just to map it, but actually really specifically with the aim of including AI. Okay, so there's a difference there. Okay, quite a few. That's surprising. 75. And again, there's a mix, right? Some might be in individual consultancies, independent coaches, and some in very large organizations. Okay.
Congratulations to the one that did it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so with that, before we actually get to a bit later, we're gonna get you to interact and look a little bit at how AI changes everything and nothing, but I'm gonna go to content now. Again, everything's a little bit more cumbersome, bear with me, because I'm not in my studio. So let's see, maybe I can't even use my iPad anymore. Okay, well, so be it. We'll use the clicker. Okay, good. So I actually don't want to start with AI at all. And David, just bring up some of the questions that might be context relevant in the chat, because it's a bit harder for me to follow the chat today.
Sure, I will.
But I want to share an analogy that Steve Blank, many of you might know Steve Blank, the father of the customer development process and lean startup process. And, he's one with us, brought it together with business model canvas and business model generation. We had a conversation in London earlier this year, before the summer. And what he brought up is this analogy to actually illustrate what's going on with AI. So specifically linked to AI, but nothing to do with AI. You know how many wagon manufacturers there were in the 1900s? Anybody know around 1900? Anybody have an idea? And I'll give you the blog post that Steve Blank wrote afterwards. This is where we crafted this. He came up with the idea and we had a chat about it. So yeah, 3,000 was actually 4,000. The question is over 4,000, somewhere 4,000, 4,500. The question is, how many of these wagon manufacturers do you think became a car company? How many pivoted towards the car company? Okay, some of you read the blog post maybe by Steve Blank. So we see 1, 2, 1 to 5, 0, Thomas. Yeah. Okay. So some of you might, 120, Janos is very, very confident there. Well, it turns out a real pivot, it's only one, okay? So this company here pivoted, and that's the only car company. Now, incidentally, I forgot the name. Geez, what was it? So the Studebaker, right? Juan, I think you read probably Steve's blog post. So Studebaker was the only car company that pivoted. Now, we can be a bit more generous and say there were two more who played in the car space. Billy Durant, he actually sold his fortune from carriages, from wagon manufacturing, and then started to invest in the auto industry. So he was at the beginning of Buick and then at the beginning of GM. Okay, so think of it. He didn't pivot. He sold everything and started a new company. And then we have the Fisher brothers. We could also say, well, they came out of it. It was like a spin-off, you know, if you want to make a point. So we have maybe 1 to 3 companies that actually made it because they were in the body industry. Body Fisher became a big player and was actually then acquired by Buick, so by GM. So Billy Durant acquired the Fisher brand afterwards. So think of it. Now, if you're interested in going a little bit deeper, you can go to Steve Blank's blog post on the topic, Blind to Disruption, the CEOs who missed the future. But I'm going to walk you through it, but I really recommend reading it. What happened? And again, nothing to do with AI, but it has actually everything to do with the characteristics of disruption. So in the 1900s, we had over 4,000 carriage makers, and they dominated, and there was a whole infrastructure around them. Okay, think of it. That was the way we did transport. At the same time, we started to see the most, the early automobiles popping up. They were powerful, but they were expensive, extremely unreliable, buggy, and the infrastructure didn't work. There were no paved roads. So think of it, like they were put off as, come on, this is a gimmick for the rich. Now, what happened, of course, and this is the typical kind of disruptive innovation theory by Clay Christensen, on the periphery, the innovators continue to innovate, the engines, rubber tires, the infrastructure starts to improve. And in 1910s, the cars are actually pretty practical. Now, what else happened? Well, you have an entrepreneur who started to build cars, but with a completely different business model. Really systematizing the manufacturing. The Ford T was the big thing then. Think of it. And then in around 1925, in the 30s, the carriage industry was gone. Okay, it was there a little bit, for history, and some people maybe did that for fun, still riding around in the carriages like we do today in the Swiss Alps, maybe. But think of it, same characteristics. Now, what are the lessons learned? Because I think that's what's interesting now. If we take this and apply it to AI and AI disruption. So the first one is tech discontinuity. So it wasn't just, okay, we take a carriage, we put an engine, and then it's a car. That's how it kind of looks like. But actually, the system is very different. That's why it wasn't that easy to just go from the carriage to the car. Now, the first cars did look like carriages, but, innovators had to continuously play around. But it was a different technology, though it still had 4 wheels. Now, what that also meant, because of the different technologies, the capital requirements. So there was quite a lot of investment needed to move towards this new space, work in a new way, in particular, when you were building factories like Henry Ford. So, wow, quite different, okay? Now, think of the cultural identity. The carriage builders saw themselves in a specific way. They thought of their companies in a specific way. Okay, they were not industrialists, they were not innovators, they were artisans. Okay, so that requires quite a shift. And then here's a big one I think we should also consider in AI, and David, you were mentioning it, nothing happens in the short term, or two little things, and then we have an MIT report showing, only 5% of these projects are actually working. And then all of a sudden, take the Gartner hype cycle, the things really take off. So I think companies really underestimated the adoption curve. And this was slower, way slower, still pretty fast for the time. Think of it, 20 years or something like that. Now with AI, it's going much faster. So I don't think we have as much time. But here's a big one also to keep in mind is that the one that pivoted, or the two that kind of started to really think car manufacturing, and the entrepreneur, Henry Ford at the center of one of the bigger car companies, or Billy Durant, they were visionary founders. They had a vision of the future and they built business models to transition. And it is not a value judgment, but I do think, looking at the companies we also work with, sometimes established companies, small or large, smaller ones sometimes less, but not necessarily, they have managerial leaders and less entrepreneurial leaders with a clear vision of the future. And then we could also push, that we go a little bit more, too much in the financials and not in financial as an outcome of a vision that we're creating. I think, like a Steve Jobs or so, financial outcome was great, but there was a vision of the future. And then here's the big one, the business model inertia. So when you have a specific business model, anything that looks different, you're going to kill it. And this is specifically something that I'm working on with leadership teams today, sometimes with AI, sometimes not. It's just adjacencies, specifically in large companies, with hundreds of thousands of employees, that when they're trying something new and the business model looks different, it often gets killed, even when we test and iterate, improve. So I think there's a big thing there also in innovation. Yeah, but we just need to prove that the idea works. Well, turns out that in a large established company, sometimes in small ones as well, proving that the idea works is not enough, okay? So now let's take AI. What about AI? And okay, some of you say, well, look at this MIT report. And I think we need to look at that, but we also need to understand, why is this happening? And we definitely, and many of you here are probably not thinking like that, we definitely need to understand it's very early on. I mean, AI has been around for a while. It's become very visible with OpenAI, but it's not new. So what is changing is the accessibility of AI. But I do want to bring it back to something that you'll say, oh, Alex, not again. But it really actually works, because I use this with senior leaders all the time, is this idea of explore and exploit. So when you have an idea, let's say a new value proposition around AI, or just improving certain processes at scale with AI, well, finding the right solution is a search. In particular, when we're talking about AI adoption systematically in a company, just to improve processes, you still need adoption. So you still need to search for the right features that are going to get in the right deployment, even to get people excited. Then comes the scaling phase, and then it becomes a management challenge. But these two worlds are fundamentally different. So many of you have seen me draw this like maybe 1,000 times. Explore, exploit. The world of running a company and the key performance indicators here, and the world of exploration, where we need to use different key performance indicators. Let me just repeat that I always use this first when I talk about new value propositions, new business models, new growth. And I did this specifically at Digital Switzerland event last year on AI, showing this and showing that this is the challenge. It's not the technology. It's figuring out, how do we do both exploration and exploitation at the same time? So if we look at that, and here I'll go fast because it's not about AI specifically, but it's the general kind of foundation. And we do want to get into AI. Is that uncertainty on the right-hand side is low, because we know the business model. On the left-hand side, uncertainty is very high. We're trying a new value proposition, AI-based. Well, guess what? We need to invest differently. We can make big bets when we know the business. We make small bets when we don't know. So AI inherently will need a lot of experimentation. And here's where leaders are falling short often, is that questions and decision-making, the mindset is different. If we know it's going to work, we talk about on time, on budget with AI projects. We don't know always if they're going to work. So we need to ask, what did we learn? And should we kill the project? So this is a big thing because it requires this dual mindset by leaders. And when it comes to AI, even more important. So my hypothesis is, why do we only have 5% that take off, is because we're applying the rules of exploit to explore. And that's why I believe only 5% of AI projects today, in that research at least, are really working, okay? So now let's get into AI. So did take us 20 minutes to kind of get there, but I think the fundamentals haven't changed, and that's what we need to understand. Now, what has changed is what AI can help us do within those fundamentals. So I want to look at the business perspective first. And David already asked me, Alex, what is these symbols? So this is for change and disruption, and this is for stability. Swiss Alps, they've been around for a while, okay? So now let's
Start to move a mountain.
Yeah, back to the mountains, my favorite place, where most of this thinking actually comes from. Even we hide out there quite a bit. So let's look at these three topics: business models, value propositions, competitive advantage. What has changed and what hasn't? And you can already see where I'm going. So if we take business models first, when we look at what has changed, not yet, but we will see new models emerge and old models will get disrupted. This is just a question of time. Now, this, I think, is going to be more serious than what we've seen with the internet. And we also have a bubble now, 100%, but we'll see more radical innovations happening, because now we're talking about white collar work and replacing intelligence. Now, what hasn't changed is the need to find profitable business models that allow you to create, deliver, and capture value. So the fundamentals haven't changed. We still need to make more money than we spend. Now, that sounds trivial, but we get so excited about AI and that we forget, if we don't focus on the fundamentals, we might actually waste a lot of money. Value propositions. Here, I think, is a big one, and I've worked specifically on this with some leadership teams on value propositions and how they might change and how a company might get disrupted. We will see, there is no doubt, new ultra-personalized, predictive, and adaptive offerings, and many of the old offerings will die. And we'll look at some cases where some companies are more at risk than others, okay? When it comes to what's stable, same thing. We still need to figure out, how are we going to create value for customers? The jobs, pains, and gains that customers have are actually relatively stable. After all, we're human beings, right? We want certain things, you know, it's the pyramid of needs, okay? Maslow still applies. And we still need to find those value propositions. So the processes don't change. We'll see the process are faster. Competitive advantage. The old moats will fade. So a lot of things that really mattered in the old world will fall away. I think even if we take Google, you know, double-sided platform, it's a big question mark there if their advertising fueled business model can resist, you know, what is happening now with, you know, most visible competitors like ChatGPT by OpenAI. Okay. Now, what won't change is that as companies, we need to ask ourselves, what are the future moats, and we need to continue to search them for those. And that's a strategic exercise that is incredibly important. Maybe with AI, even easier to do. Okay, so series of questions here. Now, let's look at the second series of questions, and then we'll do some quick questions. Speed of change, of course, cycles of innovation are accelerating, and what still remains is that we need fast cycles explore, and we need some more stable cycles exploit, which is sometimes a bit hard, but that doesn't go away. Management mindset. I believe, and it's always bad to make predictions, I'll still tell you, I believe exploration will overtake exploitation. Companies that are not able to experiment are at risk of disappearing. Companies like Amazon, you can love or hate Amazon, you can love or hate their leadership, but they're really good at exploration. And that's why they will not disappear in the age of AI. The other thing that remains stable is this entrepreneurial mindset to explore new business models, is what we've seen, right, with the wagon manufacturers and the car companies. Now, operating model, what does that mean? is we do need to get faster with innovation processes, the automation, the use of synthetic data, acceleration of testing and iteration. And that's why we also came up with little things like, a new program, a playbook to apply AI to crafting your value proposition, because you can do these things faster. Again, with fundamental rules that don't change. Now, what doesn't change is new growth comes from experimentation and evidence-based decision-making. That hasn't changed. AI or not, same thing. Okay, so I babbled a lot. Let's go quickly to Menti. And I don't know, David, if any questions came up in the
Yes,
meantime.
Alex, I will comment a bit. Something very interesting. We had like a big debate on the chat regarding the MIT report. And something that is interesting, Alex, is in the slide you share related to the MIT report, you just say 95% of the GenAI project failed. But on the Forbes article, it says that it's false because companies wanted to avoid friction. So it seems to correlate this idea. The projects don't fail absolutely. They fail because people are afraid to explore them, are afraid to have the right mindset. There were like several questions from Michael. I will bring this question live. I don't know if you can see it, Alex, but basically is Michael Pauline is telling if the fundamentals are stable, then our business model might be changed at all. Fundamentals are the same. So he's asking this question, like, are the fundamentals the same, therefore nothing is different? Or how AI is changing the way we design a business model? Maybe it's something you're going to answer later on.
We're gonna go into that. Yeah. So
exactly, that's what I thought. And yes, I think that's where it for the moment. Maybe like I'll keep some questions for the end if we have time.
Yeah. And in the meantime, let's have a quick look how you are doing AI right now.
Yeah, I will share the Menti link again if people need it.
Okay, so sorry, there's no QR code here. So just go to menti.com 6959-5630. And it's actually the same one than before. Okay, so let's see. We're getting in. Okay, I just had to click on it so we can start to see. Good. Okay. So we are, more on the left-hand side. We do have, I like this, right? Our leadership is actively working on a strategy. So we have a little bit of things going on there. Quite a lot of you have AI projects in flight. That's cool. And the results at the end matter, right? Activity doesn't matter, but still. We have first AI successes to show. This is pretty good. So we're a little bit in the middle ground. Good leadership support, maybe a bit more on the left-hand side when it comes to success. And workflows, we're very much on the left-hand side. And then we have a lot of shadow IT. So for those of you who don't know shadow IT, you came up with it, you brought in the term today, David. What is shadow IT?
Yeah, shadow IT is like, please don't report if you're doing it. But let's say you're in a company and you're not allowed to use ChatGPT. However, you're crafting all your emails with ChatGPT and you're not allowed to do it. This is what we call shadow IT. And well, many people seem to know the term. And yes, it's kind of a challenge. Many companies, for example, implemented Office 365, and therefore you have access to Copilot. But in SMEs, sometimes you don't have access to such a tool. Therefore, many people are using ChatGPT or Claude or anything else without approval. That's the definition of shadow IT. And it's not only for AI, it's for any IT tool you use without the approval of the company.
And Liriana shared a BCG research that says 54% of frontline employees are shadow AI users. Great, excellent. Okay, so maybe just very quickly on blockers, always good to kind of share and see, maybe you give this one a try. What is blocking, slowing down AI development or AI projects in your organization? And yeah, so Anthony, you're absolutely right. Change comes from the bottom. But here's the challenge, what I just showed you with Explore, Exploit. Change comes from the bottom and will die without top-down support. So when people say, innovation, everything is bottom up, I'll say, yes, not entirely true. So the ideas, the projects have to come from bottom up. Without top-down support, they're generally dead. And I'm seeing this personally now, working with some leadership teams, where adjacencies are likely to die because the antibodies of Exploit are killing them. So you're absolutely right. Coming from bottom up with this top-down support. Okay, so We don't know where to start is actually small, but a couple of you, right? Lack of expertise, legal compliance. The big one is lack of resources. Well, so let's get into that, because if the disruption risk is high, lack of resources seems like a pretty sad one to start with, but it's also kind of in innovation, we see the same challenge, right? That often the lack of resources is holding people back. Okay, excellent. We are going to get back to this afterwards, but let's go into AI disruption risk assessment. So here I want to get specifically into a little bit of a playbook. Let's say it's an emerging playbook. We do these strategy sessions, we ask these questions to leadership teams, is, how high is the risk? And I'll just ask a series of questions, and you're going to score your own company, and I'm going to show you another one. I'll give you some examples. But the first question is, does AI make my value proposition irrelevant? Okay, does AI make my value proposition irrelevant? So I'm going to show you the first example. Hogarth Worldwide is a company that creates and delivers campaigns, marketing campaigns for big brands. So they make photo shoots, videos. So guess what? Today, still alive. In 5 years, well, they're diversifying, of course, into, doing this with AI themselves. But think of it. Can they charge the same thing? So this company has 7,500 people because it takes a lot of resources and people to organize these film shoots and photo shoots. But the question is, can they, when their activities are irrelevant, can they still charge the same price? So it's a little bit, thinking of, well, we can pivot towards using AI, but will we then need 7,500 people? So this company in 5 years will probably look very different, because I don't think they will be able. Often people say, oh, but we're going to, put these people on other things. But at this scale, photos and films are going to be replaced in very few years. I think, again, predictions are dangerous. Okay, so for first one, that's clear. Disruption risk very high for that specific question. Second one, does AI make my value proposition free? So slightly different twist on a similar question, but I wanted to specifically use free. So think Getty Images, okay? The world's largest image licensing platform. They have a library of 477 million assets. Well, the question, of course, is when these images can easily be created, and again, today, maybe not, like how it should be perfectly, but can you still charge? And it's not a clear question because, Spotify is making money from music when there was a lot of free music online. Okay, so possibility. But one thing is very clear, that the second question here, I'd really think of very hard. Are my assets that gave me a competitive advantage worthless in an AI first world? Well, the 477 million images are worthless in an AI first world. Now, Getty Images have smart people, right? So they're working on, figuring out how not to die with disruption. But one of their first things is legal combat against AI companies, because AI companies are illegally using their images to train their LLMs. But still, right? I mean, have we seen that from the music industry? Like the first reaction of the incumbent is always, let's fight the legal battle. Okay, Getty Images might survive, who knows? But definitely at risk of becoming a very different company if they don't pivot very fast. Next question. Do I have access to the data to provide AI-based value propositions? And this is probably the most fundamental question. And here I'm not going to show you a company at risk. I'm going to show you a company that could become a player. I don't think, I don't know the company very well, but from the outside, it looks like they're in a bit of a trouble. But they have something very interesting. So some of you might have heard of Withings. I actually just learned about Withings a week ago. So they make scales. It's a French health tech company. They make smart devices like scales. But what I discovered is that they also have a tool called YouScan, or a product, where you scan your urine to figure out some health indicators. So whoever will own health data at scale is going to be a powerful company. So I found this really interesting because I'm actively working with leadership teams who today are at huge risk of disruption because they do not have a plan of how to even have this kind of data. This is huge, okay? So in their case, well, could be that this company could make money out of it. I think they're a little bit at risk for other reasons. Now, let's look at this, which is the extension of what we've just seen, because it also has to do with data. Could AI-enabled ultra-personalized value propositions become the norm? Okay, where it's so tailored to your needs because, you know, the company is creating value propositions specifically for you on your data. And I use the extension of before. This is a company that I'd say is at huge risk. So Estée Lauder has an $8 billion skincare unit. And think of it. So they have all these brands in skincare. But now, if consumers start to get really interested in value propositions that are absolutely tailored to them, to their specific skin type, and Estée Lauder or any other beauty company doesn't have access to that data, they could get shut out. So this is a huge question. If you do not have the access to data, you might actually get shut out of the ecosystem. Super, super important. And I see quite a few companies who are not actively trying to get future access to that data. So Estée Lauder, for me, in skincare at least, at huge risk. Okay, now let's take this idea kind of the lock-in on the right-hand side and ask, well, if we can't get access to the data ourselves, which companies might we want to partner with to get access to that data? Because data is the richest resource in an AI world, right? It's like, it's the new oil. And we've been talking about data forever, but in AI, it's another level. Okay, so now think of this partnership that some of you might know, Meta and EssilorLuxottica, so the Facebook owner and the biggest glasses brand, in this case, you know, it's around Ray-Bans, they extended their partnership. So here you have all different kinds of data that is coming together and the access to the consumer. But think of it, if this becomes widespread, well, you could get shut out because you won't have access to the same data as Meta and EssilorLuxottica have. So these are big reflections that you need to ask yourself. Do I get access to the data or do I need to make a partnership? And I can guarantee you OpenAI is already looking at some really interesting partnerships. And maybe that might be in health. You know, it's like they can shut out, depending on the direction they take and some of the other AI firms, they can shut out competitors. Okay, so that's a good move here. That's a positive move, but others will get disrupted by this. Now here's a second last one. Could AI first competitors create radically disruptive cost structures? As a little bit the extension of what we've seen before around value propositions for free, et cetera, right? Like when Google launched Google Maps, a lot of mapping companies went away. And I think, David, you were telling me about that experience of some of the watches you had, right? So the company I put here, I didn't want to take Accenture because Accenture is more in AI, though I think it's the same case. Deloitte, 480,000 people working for Deloitte. Well, if a lot of the white collar work, and some people say that 50% of entry-level white collar work is going to disappear, if you have a disruption of that, well, guess what? That is fundamental. You will not be able to charge the same amounts of money. That's why I think, you know, if you have Accenture shares, sell them. Okay. Deloitte, I think, is an even...
This is not a financial recommendation, Alex.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm not allowed to make financial recommendations. Absolutely. Okay. But here, people-heavy companies are obviously very, very at risk. What hit me is, and again, not a financial recommendation, when I looked at the stock price of Accenture, it's very high. Because some people think, well, they are in AI, but you know what? If you're in AI, but you can't charge for your 800,000 people at Accenture, your revenue stream might get killed. I think like that's exactly what happened to Kodak, because they killed their recurring revenue model with digital cameras. Okay, last one. I'll stop here, and then we're actually going to get you to score yourself. Could AI first competitors capture value in a new way? Now, here, I put a hypothetical case. Yeah, so Accenture stock price is minus 29%, right? This is because we already shared this webinar information before, right? That's the influence we have at Strategyzer. So OpenAI, and this is a hypothetical one because this is information from March 2025, didn't materialize, be that it still materializes. There were rumors that they were playing with new ways to charge for their LLMs. So knowledge worker agents, basic ones, $2,000 a month. And then the most expensive ones, PhD level research agents for $20,000 a month, because the thinking there is we're going to replace humans. Will that happen? Probably not, but think of it. There will be new revenue streams, and we don't know which ones yet. So a couple of ideas there. What I want us to do now is actually score our own business models, okay? So go to Menti, use the QR code. I'm going to switch over. See if I can do that.
I will share the Menti link again. And then we have a lot of questions, Alex. Maybe after we can do a little break to take a look at them.
Yeah, but I want to go to the example first. To the questions, yeah. Okay, so we have
shared.
Yeah, good. Let's see. Let's get started with voting. So I'm going to do something dangerous, which is refresh. Okay. So please get started. Go to menti.com 69595630. Okay, my value proposition will get disrupted, become free. So these are the same questions that we've seen before. And we might actually drop the hot or not today. I want to show one more example. Okay. So people are not too worried. The second last one, AI first competitors will disrupt us with lower cost structure. That seems to be the one standing out today, right? And AI first competitors will disrupt our revenue streams. Okay, that's interesting. And what is the least concerning? I won't have access to crucial AI partnerships. Or yeah, because data is covered in the one before. It can go hand in hand. Okay, so people not that worried about data. Interesting. That's very, very interesting. Okay. So David, before we go to questions, I want to actually show an example that I did on the Strategyzer platform, and then I threw it into ChatGPT. So let's look at an example throughout. So I'm going to take Nestle LC1. So basically this idea that, you have a business model for Nestle, their probiotic yogurt, and that's what we're going to look at. So I'll walk you through the business model first. So probiotic yogurts, LC1 is the brand that they have for the health conscious consumer. They reach them through advertising and supermarkets, the channels. And we could say, well, they earn money from the consumers, which is not true because they don't get paid by consumers. They get paid by, well, the supermarkets who sell to the consumers. So this is how the business model would have to look like. And the supermarkets obviously love LC1 because it's a high margin product, and Nestle sells to them with their sales force. So this is kind of how the business model would look like, that they're selling to retailers and the retailers sell it to consumers. Now, if we look at the relationship, they don't have a direct relationship with the consumers. They sell via retail. It's very transactional. Okay, so there's already a big risk for the channels. Key account management for their sales force, and that is a very long-term relationship. Now, if we look at the backstage, okay, before we assess this, well, what are the key resources, the brand, the IP, the production and distribution infrastructure, which Nestle has around the world, the R&D for probiotic yogurts, again, production, distribution, consumer education, because this was a new product at one point. You guys needed to educate the consumers. And that would give us the cost structure. Now, in this case, also quite a few important partnerships. Their retail partners, which are basically their first customer, suppliers, R&D network, and ad and marketing agencies. So this is the business model for Nestle for probiotic yogurts, basically all of the food stuff that they sell. Okay, different with Nespresso, which is a completely different business model. Now, what I did is I took this and I basically did an assessment. So in the Strategyzer platform, that's where I am. This is what we use when we use our programs. We tell you how to map out a business model like this. We just launched actually competing on business models with Kurt, my colleague. Here I did a scoring of the business model, not related to AI, just how good is the business model. So I scored, but what I want us to do is now take a different kind of scoring, the questions that you just answered for your business model. So what I did is I took the business model of Nestle for yogurt, and I took here the AI first questions, okay, that you just answered. I put them into ChatGPT with this prompt: score Nestle's business model for LC1, look at the disruption, score from 0 to 10. And if you do that, actually, it's pretty powerful. I just want to show you how also, this is starting to disrupt fields where humans are pretty good. This gives you some really good thinking. And obviously, I asked it already before, can you give me the reasoning as well? So if we take the value proposition, it gives it a score that's very low, 2 out of 10, because the yogurt is not going to be free. It's not going to go away. Key activities, also kind of a 3. Key resources, kind of a 3. Here's where it gets interesting. I won't have access to crucial customer data required for AI. So today, at least in the business model that I sketched out, Nestle does not have access to that data. And with ChatGPT, we kind of got that out there. Pretty interesting. And similar to AI partnerships. And for the other ones, kind of pretty low. Now, if I do go quickly back, and then we can look at a couple of questions maybe for 5 minutes. If I do go back to our slides here, if we look at the business model, this strength, you go through an analysis a little bit deeper, what you'll see is, it turns out, and this hit me when I started analyzing some business models and doing some leadership sessions, that when you're in the physical world, low tech business, like Nestle, they're basically in branding and distribution to retail, they're less prone to be disrupted because they're in low tech. So here, there's very low risk in the very short term, could be in the higher term, different from the skincare brands. Because skincare brands are also distribution, but it's much more, it's much different when we're talking about skin stuff that you can probably hire through the internet or buy through the internet. So I just wanted to show you kind of applying it to a business model like Nestle. These are the kinds of things that we're increasingly working with leadership teams before we even get to innovation, because they need to think business model, explore, exploit first before we even go into the project level. Okay, so let's go through some questions. And I think, hot or not, we're probably going to have to skip today.
Cool. A lot of questions, Alex. So I think this is quite interesting. So I will read the question loud. It's from Christian Rear. I hope I pronounce your name well. So in your opinion, is it possible to build a sustainable business model when innovation cycles of AI are becoming so short? Isn't that a contradiction? What I develop today will quickly become obsolete tomorrow. So I think the question, Alex, is, yeah, if it's so easy to create something, how to create sustainable business model?
I don't think so. So I think the question is obviously to ask, what are the moats? So today, what protects Nestle, whatever fast the AI cycles are, is their distribution machinery. Like, they have a global network of distribution. However fast the iteration cycles, that is not going to be disrupted in the next couple of years. The fact that consumers are probably very likely to buy food through these channels. I mean, e-commerce was there, first kind of disruption. Direct to consumer in that space is not as much of a challenge as, for example, in skincare, where it's very likely to change faster. So I'm not worried about the fast iteration cycles. You still need to implement something, because consumers are still looking for solutions, and the adoption and change cycles of consumers are much slower. So I think we're too focused on technology and change, and too little focus on consumers. Jobs, pains, and gains don't change. They're actually pretty stable over time.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. There is another question, and I can also start answering this question. It's a question from Stefan Koller, which is, in relation with Emmanuel's comment, will we end up with AI helping us develop value proposition geared at AI-generated persona? So Alex, I will take this one because we work together on the playbook on the create strong value proposition with generative AI. And where AI helps you is how do you collect customer data at scale? For example, how can you record every single customer conversation online or voice conversation? And then how can you collect real verbatim to craft your value proposition? So it is true that, in fact, we have a cohort of people that recommended us to use AI-generated personas to create value proposition. And we say, we prefer to base our value proposition based on real verbatim and quotes and express pain points, not based on what AI believe is true. So maybe Alex, you want to add something on that too?
Yeah, I think AI will be a formidable kind of source for doing that. And I do believe there's a role for synthetic users, consumers, and customers. At the same time, you know, the world is very diverse. When we're talking about industrial tech and we're creating, you know, automation for buildings, for example, that's not going to cut it. And I do think the biggest kind of question mark I have is for incremental innovations, AI will be perfect and actually help us a lot. When it comes to fundamentally different things and complex value propositions, in particular B2B, I don't think today, again, we don't know for tomorrow, synthetic AI interviews and stuff like that will cut it. But what is very clear, and this is what David was saying, is that developing value propositions is literally 10 times, if not much faster with the support of AI. So you can use AI, but I do still believe, at least for a year or two, I still think the human is incredibly important. But I think, you know, humans combined with AI are going to beat people without AI for sure, at the very least in speed.
Yeah. Cool. Let me see if we have time to take a few additional questions. There's this question from Ron Vervage. I will share it in the chat here, which is, I hear more and more the term system innovation, meaning looking at AI alone is not enough. What is your viewpoint on system innovation? Not familiar with this term, Alex. Maybe you are?
So I don't know specifically what you're referring to, but what is very clear is AI in isolation is silly. It's useless. So that's why, you know, we started off this webinar already with explore, exploit, and then you have the value propositions, you have the business models, and a business model is the combination of the different pieces. So from the solution to the value proposition to the business model, it's a combination of a lot of different pieces that create the system that leads to success. So I do think where you're right, and I might read it a little bit something different into your wording, is that we do need to get much better at thinking systems. But when I say systems, I think business models, value propositions, technology solutions, you know, everything that we need to do that. It's combining these. And that's what's hard. And that's what entrepreneurs still do very well. And AI alone won't be able to do very well. David, we can't take another question, but maybe we already launched one of the polls.
Yes, exactly. I think it will be great if we can launch. Yes, I think we're gonna go to an end. So if you like what you see here, you might want to talk to us to see how can we help you. Something that we often do, like what Alex is just doing right now, is we could potentially do a follow-up workshop on AI strategy and business model with your team. So if you're interested, please drop your email and we'll get back to you to see if we can do a workshop with you. And maybe Alex, well, the presentation was great and really enjoyed seeing the chat, but what's next? How can we help people even further? What can people do today if they say, hey, maybe it's time for me to refresh my business model? I guess you have something to share.
Yeah, so first, you know, what we're really trying to do is to help people and companies at scale. And these programs and playbooks that we're launching of how to, you know, apply our process are very powerful. So we're really focusing back on that. We kind of got away from it for a while. We were working, you know, with very established companies. And now we saw the synergy between both. So we are launching a couple of prosumer playbooks and programs, and we're going back to the basics. And that's also just to get you to use the Strategyzer platform again. So you can sign up for competing on business models. You can start at no cost before it starts charging you after a week. And that's back to the basics, but just to give you a feel for what we actually mean with playbooks, because like, oh, what's a playbook? And people say, oh, is that something to learn? Well, yes, no. So we want people to apply these tools. And I'm super excited about these things because I've been running a couple of leadership playbooks on strategy with a big beauty company. So that's why I'm putting some beauty examples there. So we're really into this idea of playbooks. And the one here, competing on business models, is one that we launched just to get people started with playbooks. And then, hopefully more on AI will follow. You mentioned the one, David, that you're helping collaborate on, AI to create great value propositions. Absolutely something we're focusing on. So don't hesitate to get in touch. Specifically also, if you're interested on AI workshops for leadership and teams. And again, I think the technology experts are there. There's a lot of talk on technology. There's not enough talk on value propositions, business models, and how you actually do that, the explore, exploit part.